Welcome to the Health Coach Nation podcast. My name is Hailey Rowe, and I'm a sales and marketing coach and LinkedIn lead generation service provider. I work with health, life, and mindset coaches and online service-based business owners to help them get more sales, shift their time to the client-generating activities instead of just the busy work, and overcome that social media overwhelm. Let's get into the show. If you've been working at your coaching business for a while, you might have found out by now that it's not as easy as you thought to get clients. If that is you, I want to invite you to check out my free workshop sharing how to go from crickets to clients, creating a freebie funnel formula. So in the series, I share with you how to make a freebie that people actually want, that they actually opt into, so that you can grow your email list, so that you always have an audience to share your offers with. And you always have an audience where they are being nurtured by you, they're moving through the sales cycle, and you're not stuck every time you have a launch feeling like you have zero eyeballs on your content. So if that has been you, if you've been stuck in that and you know you need a bigger audience, you know you need to nurture your audience, go to haileyrowe.com/live event, all one word, to get the free series and get started. With Anders, and he's going to tell you all about his business journey. We're going to touch on mindset today, how he's helped many coaches and entrepreneurs, and we'll get into it. So thank you for being here. Can you give us your background and how you got into what you do today?
Absolutely, Hailey. First off, thank you for having me on. I love how you create these deeper conversations for coaches and people who are also helping to move other people along, on their journey. So for everyone listening, if this show inspired you, make sure you leave Hailey a 5-star review. It's the easiest way for her to build her audience on this platform.
Thank you.
So yeah, it's my story is a life of illusions and contrast. As a recovering illusionist, I'd like to say that I spent 20 years in the entertainment industry. I came from Denmark, which is where the accent is from as well, 19 years ago. And I arrived here with 2 suitcases and a deck of cards, and I rebuilt my career in magic, actually, performing shows on cruise ships and television. But then I lost it all. My health crashed. My business collapsed. My dad passed away. I was buried in debt. It was not a wonderful place to be. It was a pretty dark chapter, but what felt like a failure sort of became my turning point at that moment. And I realized that the biggest illusions weren't the ones I was teaching on stage. It's the ones in our own minds. So I decided to work on my mindset and get myself back on track. And I also decided that I wanted to do what I did, but teach what I had figured out for myself to get myself back on track. And I wanted to work with the best in the world in personal development. And at the time in 2016, I attracted Bob Proctor into my life, and we co-created a program together. And I eventually built an award-winning experience called Real Magic Live that bridges personal transformation and entertainment. We've helped over 10,000 people, many entrepreneurs, a lot of coaches, break through their own limiting beliefs and mental illusions. We've generated $12 million in the process, and today I lead a team of 5 people who all committed to helping millions in the future overcome their own illusions. So that's a short version of the story, Hailey.
That is so cool. I love that. So tell me a little bit about that turning point. How did you meet Bob Proctor? How did you guys talk about making a program together? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, so it's interesting because many people ask me how it happened, but they rarely ask me who I was before it happened. And I think what happened in my life was I was so fed up being a past version of me. And maybe you can relate, maybe your listeners can relate, but that's certainly where I was. I was so sick and tired of being sick and tired, worked hard for 20 years, nothing happened. And I had read the book, The Power of Your Subconscious Mind, at the time, and I knew intuitively that I could change stuff. And after all, that's what I did when I came here originally, rebuilt my career in magic. I just didn't know what I had done. And so I started really priming myself every day with the idea that I was already working with the best in the world. And my natural ways of thinking started to shift. My state started to shift. I had new ideas. My discipline started improving. And everything started to shift. And I reached a point where I didn't doubt whether or not this was going to work. I knew it was going to work. I had that sort of level of certainty. It almost felt silly at the time. But in retrospect, I can see what happened. I just adopted the idea and I just made that assumption real. I didn't put a name on the person. I just said the best in the world in personal development. And at the time I lived in Las Vegas, And my partner had to go to work New Year's Eve 2015, and my intuition told me just to pick him up, but pick him up an hour early, and that didn't make any sense to my logical mind, which is usually the part of our mind we use to create results with. It all has to be logical, reasonable, right? But I sort of surrendered to that intuitive nudge and picked him up. Went there to pick him up an hour early, walked around, ran smack into Bob Proctor in the reception at the Bellagio. And so that set me, on a journey that I still sort of pinch my arm to this day. But he asked me what I did, and I said, I did illusions and magic, and now I want to do what you do. And he went,
Wow.
magic and illusions, personal development, never heard it before. And he went, do you got time to meet for lunch tomorrow? And I'm like, yeah, let me look at my busy schedule, So, we met for lunch and New Year's Day the following year. And
Wow.
he became a great friend, great mentor. And he actually invited me to create a program with him in 2020, which was, of course, an intention I had set years prior. But
cool.
That's how it came about.
Yeah, and it really shows how powerful it is to be the kind of person that, believes in yourself and shift your identity first. And then a lot of the hows and the pieces will start to come up and fall into place. Would you agree with that that's kind of the first step?
It's always in that order. There's tons of theory and research that's been done on why most entrepreneurs don't make it past the 5-year mark. And it's all contributing factors. Surely the market, whatever, it is all contributing factors. The determining factor is always a person's mindset. I have had clients who went from 100K a month to $1 million in a month in a year and a half against all odds. I had people whose industries were closed down in the middle of the pandemic, and they came out winning, even best years in 25 years. People think, how the heck does that happen? It's because it's people who understand themselves and their mind just a little bit better than the average person. That's it. Simple. It's just not easy. And it's interesting. We did an event in Europe, in Denmark 3 weeks ago. We had 300 people there. And when I asked the audience who could stand up here and make a presentation around their mental faculties and how to develop them, I get maybe a few hands. There's psychiatrists, psychologists in the audience, really smart people. We have learned virtually nothing about ourselves. We've been programmed how to think, but we haven't been taught how to think. So that's really the determining factor as I see it, Hailey. It's disassociating what's going on outside with our state. And it's not easy. It's simple. It's just not easy. But in 2016, I was looking at a blood test that said I was sick. I had buried in debt, owed 50,000. I earned 40 a year. So it was a pretty hopeless situation.
Wow.
And nothing worked. And Bob asked me, what do you really want? And I said, well, I want more freedom. I want to earn more money. And he said, if you do exactly what I'm telling you, you can have anything you want. Now, I did not believe I could after 20 years of struggle, but I believed he knew what he was talking about. So for the first time in my life, I surrendered to coaching. And I think, and that's what you do. You coach brilliantly. A lot of coaches and business owners, they should surrender to a coach who has proven by results that they know what they're talking about and then follow their lead. That was the first time I did that. He helped me collapse 40,000 in a year to 750,000 in 11 months. It was such a shocking result. I had no idea what happened to me actually in the moment, but I could see my results had changed so dramatically. I let go of the logic and I surrendered to coaching and teaching from a person who obviously knew what they were talking about. And that made the difference.
Wow. Yeah, that's amazing. So tell me a little bit, because some people listening are going to hear that and they're in that debt moment, or they're in that health scare moment, and they feel graspy. They feel a sense of urgency. They feel like they have to change things right now. And sometimes that scarcity energy gets in the way of them trusting the process and surrendering and enjoying the journey. So how does somebody start to shift out of that, or make room for, just not being in that, like, I got to do this tomorrow or else type of energy?
I love that. That's such a great question. Viktor Frankl, who was a Viennese psychiatrist, he ended up in the German concentration camps in the war. He wrote a book called Man's Search of Meaning later on, and he reached the conclusion that the last of human freedoms is the ability to think freely. And he said there's a stimulus between what happens and our response to it. And in that gap is where human freedom lies. So if he could come to that conclusion with all the psychological and physical torture he was subjected to, can you imagine all the mental freedom we have today? That's really where it begins. It begins with controlling our own mind, because you're right. The worst state to be in is that needy, desperate, I have to energy. Nothing is more repelling. And so how do we do it is the question. It's priming ourselves more, understanding how our mind works. We have 6 mental tools: imagination, intuition, will, reason, memory, and perception. Beautiful tools. Start utilizing them to our benefit. So it's calming down. It's calming the mind down so that the central nervous system follows. That's the starting point, because if we're in this energy, the first thing that goes out the door is the creative faculties, and we need those in our businesses. So that's what I did back then. I looked at an eviction notice on my door. I had a blood test that said I was sick. I was buried in debt. But I was able to somehow, like looking back at it, it was sort of a miracle. But I was able to calm down my mind to a point where, all right, I know my heart is beating. I'm grateful for that. That was my starting point when I woke up every morning. Started with gratitude. It sounds so simple. It was like, I know I should be grateful, right? But are we actually living it? Are we changing our state? I'm on day 2,147 in a row of practicing this, and I'll never stop. It changes everything. But there's a little more to it. So you write it out in hand, because writing causes thinking. Thinking causes emotions. Emotions change the frequency. So that's a little detail, but I think it's important.
Yeah. So what are you writing out? What you're grateful for? Are you writing out your vision? Give us an example.
So there's a 2-step process, Hailey. I write out first things that are in my life. I'm grateful for my ability to think freely. I woke up in my favorite country in the world. I am breathing. I'm experiencing things with my senses. My little dogs, I'm so grateful for that. That's things that is currently in my life that I can feel grateful for. Then 5 things that is in my life, and I transfer that emotion to 5 things that are on their way that have to do with my goal. Now I build an emotional bridge, pre-framing that state. And now the aim is to live in that state more of the time. So I can actually be grateful in advance for a result that isn't here yet on the physical plane, but that's on its way. That's the perpetual transmutation of energy. We think the physical is where things are. It's not. It's where things end up. Everything is energy. And so we got to understand that. Otherwise, we're pedaling around in a world of symptoms. And that's where most people live in their businesses.
Yeah, 100%. So when you were dealing with all of those circumstances at once, how did you manage overwhelm? Because a lot of the people listening here will think, oh, I'm working my day job while I'm trying to build my business, while I'm trying to deal with XYZ problem.
Yep.
And they're going through big transitions in their life.
Yes.
And they tend to get paralyzed from all the things.
Absolutely.
What would you say to them?
So the first thing to do is to create space to create from. Because if you're already in the state of paralysis, nothing is going to happen. You can work twice as hard. You'll just send yourself to the graveyard a little earlier. There's no point in that. So we've got to create this space. So if you're really busy, find a way to create a little more leverage in your day. So have somebody help cook. Have somebody help clean. Have somebody help take care of some of the chores so that you can free up at least an hour a day to work on your mindset and your skill set and your tool set. That's it. Mindset first. So you can divide it 50-50, half an hour to the mindset, where you just prime yourself, do your mindset routines. It's essential in today. It's not an optional thing. It's essential that we do that every day. Not some days, every day. Whether that's gratitude, I have a walking meditation that I do every morning. And I offer it for free to anyone who wants it, because it's so powerful, where you anchor in the state of the person you're being. That's the one I used in 2016, having no really idea of what I was doing at the time, but I can see it now. So it's important to get the body into action, because the body is the instrument of the mind. So when we start controlling the mind, the body will start expressing different habits, different energy. It also changing what we're attracted. So that's the starting point. Creating space to create from is the short answer.
I love that. Yeah. What would you say is one of the top things that you've struggled the most with overcoming when it comes to a mindset block
Mhm.
or something on your business journey?
100% feeling worthy.
Mm,
100% feeling worthy of the good that I desired. I saw other people doing great, creating great results. I desired that, but I didn't feel worthy of it. I grew up in a little town in Denmark. My parents were children in the Second World War, lag and limitation in my DNA, literally running generations back. And I think a lot of people can relate, in various ways. And Bob really helped me overcome that. And he said, "What do you really want?" And I started expressing for the first time what I really wanted. And that came with a big gap in worthiness. But I think that's important, actually. We want to aim for a goal that, one, we really want. We have no idea how to get there, and yet we know it's going to get us into growth. I think those are the three prerequisites. Some people will probably not agree, and I'm okay with that. But I've collapsed 40,000 in a year to 750. Then we took it over 1 million. Then we generated over $1 million in a month. So I'm not doubting whether or not this works. I know it works, but you have to surrender to what we really want. Now, when we go for what we really want, now the doubt creeps in. Now the limitations come sneaking up on us. That's where self-image comes into play. Now we're going to look at what are those beliefs. I didn't feel worthy of the money that I wanted to earn, so I started changing that by writing out in full a full detailed self-image. I am worthy of the money I earn. I invested wisely and circulated with joy. It was almost hard for me to say. It was almost like the muscles in the body couldn't express that idea. It was so foreign to me. But I started celebrating when I saw people earn more and do better in the world, whereas before I would sort of look down upon them. Then I also learned, Hailey, that, and I guarantee you this, most of your listeners would love to attract premium paying clients, credit cards in hand, ready to buy. That's the dream scenario. Here's the issue: most coaches aren't willing to become the person who's attracting those people. What I mean by that, they're not willing to themselves invest in themselves at a high enough level to where they naturally attract other people to them who's willing to pay them. In fact, they do the opposite. When they get a great offer, they sort of hold back. What are they trying to sell me? They have that energy about them. And then they wonder why everybody wants payment plans. Then they wonder why everybody wants to haggle about, is it $50 an hour or $100 an hour? How about a $100,000 solution? I mean, I've sold solutions up to $50,000. People say, well, how can you sell for that much? Well, the value is 10 times higher. I've invested in myself on that level. So I know that the skills that I've built is something that is worthy of presenting forward or providing others with. And I think that is the biggest struggle. We don't feel worthy, and yet we hold back when we're presented with opportunities. The old
yeah. I
Go
love
ahead.
the way you put that. I love the way that you put it, that you're not the kind of person who, you're not willing to become the kind of person who those high ticket people would be attracted to. Because it's kind of like how Tony Robbins, he's talked about, if you want to attract your dream partner, instead of making a list of all the qualities they have and what you want in them,
Mhm.
make a list of who you need to be to attract that partner,
100%.
right? And what about when it comes to working with coaches and this whole business journey, which we know can have twists and turns and take longer than we think, or,
Mhm.
have different setbacks? What are your
Absolutely.
tips for enjoying the journey and staying committed?
100%. Can I add one more comment to the other
Yeah,
identity question?
please do.
So I think the other biggest struggle most coaches have is that they still, in their subjective minds, have a big fat equal mark between time is money. They either had a job or they're still having a job where they are paying with their time and their life, basically. So, whatever they come up against in terms of offers in the marketplace, everything feels expensive. Of course, it does. They paid with their life. But one of my other great mentors, Myron Golden, he said, I pay with whether I buy a trip on a private jet or I pay for a bottle of water, I pay with the same, and that's my ideas. Employees pay with their time. Entrepreneurs pay with their ideas. And so we have to change the way we think about this. If I want to become a really very, very skilled entrepreneur who's collapsing time frames, I got to look at myself as a business owner who's investing in me so that the return investment is as great as it can be. People that don't get very far in this industry, they still drag the good old employee mindset with them. They think they have to save up for it first. They borrow it, print it, whatever, but find it, because you can't afford not to do it. Actually, when we're looking at it in a bigger scheme of things, people say, how much does it cost? How much does it cost not to? I was paying an enormous amount of ignorance tax in my life by not investing in me as a business owner. So that's really, I wanted to get that in there because a lot of coaches are struggling with that. Now,
Yeah, big paradigm shift.
huge. And so could you remind me of the second question again, please?
Yeah, so we were talking about with coaches enjoying the journey, because a lot of times I see impatience come up for coaches. They, oh my gosh, I started yesterday and I don't have 10 clients yet.
Sure. Yeah, so there's two things here. I think, like Bob Proctor told me in the beginning, he said, Anders, if you can't fall in love with helping people, forget about it. You have to fall in love with helping people. Everything else follows. And so when people go into it for the money, they're toast. It's the wrong idea. Like, money is an expression of service. Money often follows great levels of service, but should never be the main motivator. And so when we fall in love with the idea of service, and at the same token become the person from an identity perspective who already achieved our aim, we can't be impatient anymore. So think about it, Hailey. Where does impatience come from? Impatience arises when I sort of live in two worlds. I recognize where I'm at physically, and I don't want to be there. And yet I'm over here mentally trying to create a different life for myself. Now impatience arrives. It's a symptom of not understanding ourselves, because if we were, we would see that everything originates in the mind. And if I can get the mental picture of my goal so lodged up in my subjective to a point where I'm living there, I'm no longer impatient. I'm just so grateful for already being there. And I would attract on the physical plane everything prerequisite to getting there on the physical plane. So I think that paradigm shift is important too. And then you sort of enjoy the journey, have fun with it, and you disassociate from the physical. You don't get attached to the physical. I think that's where a lot of people end up too. They get too attached to the physical. And I see it often when people are predominantly operating from their left hemisphere of their brain. They're logical, rational, love to calculate things out. They primarily live through the senses. People who are more intuitive, imaginative, they have a little easier time accepting that idea. So it's not either or. It's a matter of being sort of in the middle, utilizing both energies to the best of our ability.
Okay. Yes. And did I see correctly that you had a book about overcoming distractions and getting focused?
That's probably the Swedish brain expert Anders Hansen that has that book out.
Oh, okay.
That's not me. I did publish a book though around awareness, but it's only in Danish at this point.
Okay. Yeah. So tell me a little bit more about, how do you stay anchored to your awareness and where you want to go and that good energy? I know you mentioned some of your habits, writing your gratitudes, and 5 things you're grateful for that are coming your way. Is there any other tips you have for us to kind of stay anchored?
Absolutely. In fact, I love teaching those frameworks because I do believe they are the determining factor for our success. And I know your episodes here about half an hour, so I would just encourage anybody to find me on YouTube. I did a whole video on a morning routine, and I break it down detailed into the steps that I have used. But I also think it's a matter of having fun with it. You shouldn't get too rigid and structured. You should have fun with it, experiment with the different aspects of it, but ultimately it comes down to how you feel. Does this change my state? Yes or no? Because otherwise it just becomes another task. None of us needs more tasks in our day. We need simple steps we can follow that effectively changes our mental, emotional, and physical state. And when that is achieved, we're off to the races.
Yes, totally. Well, this is super helpful. And is there anything else you'd want to share with the audience about, achieving their coaching business goals or staying out of scarcity mindset that you want to leave them with today?
Yeah, I mean, we can. We have different tools we can give away to help people staying anchored. I do think that's important. The mindset. I will always be the biggest proponent for mindset and mental emotional work. So one, we got to figure out what mental illusion is currently blocking us. Two, we got to get going in understanding how the mind-body connection works and how to prime ourselves. And all folks have to do is find me on Instagram, Facebook at Real Anders Hansen. And then I think our team actually set it up where if anybody types Health Coach Nation in one of our posts, then they will get the whole kit sent to them for free.
Amazing. Well, that is awesome. Everybody check that out. Real Anders Hansen on Instagram and all of the channels. And thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks so much for listening to this podcast. And if it's really helpful for you, I'd really appreciate if you share it and or leave a written podcast review. This tells the podcast sites that our show is useful and it will be promoted to more people that way. Thanks again.